Okay, it's 7 o'clock. I'd like to call a meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, make a note that council members Brungard and Major are absent. Old business approval of minutes. The regular meeting minutes of August 3rd, 2023 were provided for review. I need a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes of August 3rd, 2023 as presented.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Call the roll.
Mr. Stednicka?
Abstain.
Mr. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Kirby?
Yes.
Mr. Garvey?
Yes.
Mr. Bueller?
Yes.
Mr. Clements?
Yes.
Motion passed. Audience participation. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the council on an item that is not on the agenda? Okay, come forward and state your name and address, please. Name and address, please.
Janet Campbell, I live out Covington Woods Apartments, and I'm here to say that I know that there is nothing that you can do, and I understand that fully. I was just trying to make you aware of what some of the issues are, and I was called into Covington Woods by the manager, who accused me of misrepresenting to you my electric bills that was over $600.
Right.
And I also heard from the head of the state housing, who had said that she had been told by the manager that I was confused and that I had been running emergency heat, which was not true. And after they found out what my electric bills were, they said, obviously, that's not the case. And since they have so many throughout the state complaints against well-haunt properties, that they are taking their own actions, but they unfortunately can't do anything for me. I'm going to have to take matters into my own hands. But I did bring, in case any of you wanted to look at it, the graphs from 12 months prior and 12 months after this malfunction with my electrical, which this year I stopped by when I turned on my air conditioning for the first time, turned on the thermostat, that after the air conditioning went off, I felt hot air coming out, and I went over to the closet where the whatever machine is in there, and felt it, and it was still running. And I did what the technician who had looked at it when I had the $602 bill told me, yeah, shutting off the circuit breaker resets it, which also helps me in the winter when I have my thermostat on 72, when it goes up to 77, 78, and even 88 degrees. If I shut it off, then it does. I've never had anybody come out there to repair it or anything like that. I know they've had a problem with mowing out there because their lawnmower broke, and it took over 3 weeks for them to mow. They finally called the lawn service to mow it, which was mowed 2 days ago, which was great because the grass was literally, when I measured it outside my door, 16 inches high. The potholes, they told me last year they were fixing them. They still got, supposedly, they're waiting on 3 bids. You know, things just never get done. But if anyone wants to read the year before and the year after, it shows all my kilowatt hours on these 2 pages.
She can give those to Tish, and Tish
Yeah.
can email them to us.
Yeah.
Just give those to her, and she will email them to us, and you can pick them back up. And you can pick them back up.
Thank
Okay, thank you. Was there anybody else? I thought I seen another hand. Yes, ma'am. Please come up and state your name.
I'm Marjo Anderson, and I live at 900 4H Road. Been there 48 years. 4 or 5 weeks ago, I got up on a Saturday morning and I had a dead deer in the front yard. And I called Lansing Police, and of course, this we're closed Monday to Friday, 8 to 5, da-da-da. Okay, so I did not call the sheriff because it was not an emergency, okay? So I waited until Monday morning, and I called the Lansing Police Department, again, told them, you know, what had happened. And by this time, of course, the coyote had drug it a few feet, and the vultures had gotten into it. So anyway, I guess the police went by, took a look at it a couple times, and then I did have one police officer, female officer, pull in my drive and tell me that because it's on my property, it's my problem. And I was shocked to think that this city doesn't have an ordinance or a code to remove wild game that has been hit on the road. I mean, people on 4H Road run about 40 to 50 miles an hour. And for me, 76-year-old, to drag a dead deer, and to be very honest, I would have just drug it across the road, put it in a ditch. If I had strength, I would have done it. But, you know, for a city this size and the taxes that we pay, I'm sure the average citizen isn't aware of that. I was shocked. I really was. And it may sound very simple to you, but it wasn't to me.
What? So, do we have anybody here that can speak to the ordinance we do have? I mean, I know, like, if animals are obstructing the road, we take them off.
Our animal
right?
control officers will take care of stuff like that.
Well, I was told if it was on the easement, that Lansing would remove it. But because it was on my property, it was my problem. I don't understand that. I don't buy that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not sure what our ordinance is, but I'm going to. Is the chief going to address it here, or?
Okay, obviously you don't have one, but I wish you would look into it.
Yeah.
Maybe some.
Yeah, we might not have one that says we can go on anybody's personal property and take off a dead animal. I mean,
I'll
if
ask
you request,
Exactly.
I wouldn't
Yeah,
see why we
someone
wouldn't. But
requests that, I think that as a tax-paying citizen, somebody from the city should come out to the house and remove it.
Yeah.
So that's it.
Okay.
Thank
No,
you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
I can address part of that. What I will say is next time it is an emergency, don't wait 2 days. Just give us a call the sheriff's department, have us come out.
Really?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. 2 days on a dead animal in summer, there's not a whole lot left to pick up. And I wasn't there, I don't know what the communication between the officer and there was. We will make an opportunity, but after 2 days in the summer in Kansas,
Especially with coyotes.
there's not a whole lot left to pick up on that. And a deer in the summer, yeah, it's going to stink and it's going to be nasty and everything else. And that's the best thing I can tell them. We don't necessarily have an ordinance. If we have an accident where there's a deer involved or an animal, we do try to remove it. In the summer, in the wintertime, we got more time. In the summertime, we don't have a lot of time just because 48 hours in a carcass in the sun.
Yeah.
there's just not-
Doesn't our animal control officer, doesn't that fall into his or
Yeah.
her realm?
It would fall in there, but after 2 days, there's really, literally, it's liquefied. There's nothing to pick up. That's what we came across on this. The 2 officers that went out there on that Monday, and like I said, like I would tell her the day of, if she would have called that Saturday morning, we would have went out there and we would have had time to get it out of there before after 2 days, there's just nothing to grab a hold of and move on that. It's just nasty.
Okay.
So,
Well, I think,
Well, I mean, we might be able to put something out, about that.
well, I think the thing is, just because it's not from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, doesn't mean you won't respond. I mean,
well, that is if she would, and I don't know, but
Yeah.
yeah, I would tell anybody if you have something like that, call us when you first find it. It makes it a lot easier all the way around.
Right. I mean, and there is the recording.
On
It
that.
says if
So,
it ain't an emergency, so a lot of people are going to say,
Yeah.
well,
And I
dead
get
deer
that.
on my property ain't an
I get
emergency.
that didn't feel like that was an emergency. I
Yeah.
do get that, but yeah, summer heat in Kansas, not pleasant.
You can call 911 and say it's a non-emergency
Yeah,
too.
you can.
Right. So they don't come lights and sirens.
They have a non-emergency number.
So-
You can call a non-emergency number and they will dispatch
But they can also, they can do 911, they've got a non-emergency number. So, I mean, we'll do everything we can, but there are certain incidences that not a lot we can do on it. So, because I believe it was down to skull and bones at this point in time. So, okay.
Okay, is there anyone else in the audience that would like to address the council on an item that is not on the agenda? No takers? Item number 2 is the countywide transportation study update. Jeff McCarroll from Kimley Horn will present an update on the final product of the countywide transportation study and outline the next steps to put the plan into place.
Yes, good.
You're on.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Pleasure to be here with you this evening on what is kind of that final step in what's been a year-long process going through this. A few things we're going to go through today is we'll do a quick recap of the project, talk about some of the engagement because we've had a lot of input from the community and stakeholders through this process as well as elected officials. A quick refresher on that list of projects that we were evaluating. A discussion of the prioritization tool, which was online for everybody to experiment with and remains so if you'd like to take a look at that. And then finally, those action items and conclusions coming out of this study for you. And I believe later on the agenda for your consideration will be, I think it's a resolution for you to accept this, which carries some weight to it. And we'll talk about that here in a moment. Our process, and we went through this last time we were in front of you a few months ago, really focused and we began on 2 different tracks. One, we started to look at and define the criteria on how we would evaluate projects. And we want to look at through the lens not only from your communities and the communities within the county, but the lens of those who have competitive funding sources that could go towards transportation projects. The Federal Highway Administration, the Mid-America Regional Council, Kansas Department of Transportation, to name a few there. At the same time, we started to look at the project. We'd had more than 20 years of studies done in this county by different entities, different organizations. Some of them overlapped, some of them different. How do we start to define what those projects are? Today, as we're through this process, we're at this final step. So we're at the point that we're looking for adoption of this plan as a guidance document for you. It's not a binding statement necessarily, but it sets some priorities that carry some weight. One of the things we've talked about in the past is that when you look at competitive funding sources that are out there, speaking with more than one voice carries tremendously more weight. So the goal of this is to start to provide that guidance to the community on what projects might be best scoring with those competitive programs that are out there and to bring more weight behind you when you go to apply. Reminder of some of the stakeholder engagement. We had a series of meetings with key stakeholders, be it economic developments, different community organizations throughout. We met virtually with them in the fall of 2022 and then in person again in the spring of 23. We had several public meetings. 2 of them were hybrid. We did both an in-person, 2 in-person meetings in the late fall last year, as well as an online meeting, and then again this spring we had an online meeting for everybody to share this information. And then we've had a few rounds of elected officials briefings. Late spring this year, I was in front of you and we're talking about some of these projects. And then this is that summary statement we're going through. This is the 3rd elected body that we'll be speaking to this week, and we've got a couple more in the coming weeks as we get through that process. Again, where we started, you might recall, this was the list of projects that were identified. Some had been studied more than others, but they were far-ranging. A lot of them overlapped, conflicted with each other. And through the process of going through this and looking at it, discussing with the public, we were able to narrow that down to actually 43 different projects, ranging from interchanges to new roadways to upgrades and safety improvements throughout. The total capital costs for those projects summed up to be about $1.5 billion. So those are the projects we're going to take a look at and see what we can evaluate moving forward. We spent time last spring in front of you talking about how some of those criteria that we would evaluate projects with. We won't go through that again with you today. It is all in the report, though, that you can look at. We talked about traffic operations, safety, access to amenities and jobs, sustainability and equity, cost effectiveness. And then we started to weight those categories. What is important by different users? What did we hear from the public and what was important for their priorities? What did we hear? You had the ability to weigh and look at things yourself. So if you, for instance, said, I want to know what, if we're to take everything else aside and say we want to focus just on safety improvements, what would be those top-ranked projects? But then we also set up and defined ways that you could see from the Mid-America Regional Council, from the Kansas DOT, and from the U.S. government, what do they prioritize? Because they're all different to some degrees, and what projects would compete in those areas. This was the tool that's online. It's online today, and again, it allowed everybody to go through these categories, select the projects if you had the chance to look at this. But we also had down at the bottom some buttons that would help to automatically set those rankings based on those criteria to help evaluate. So coming to it, where do we stand today, and what is the kind of the summary of those improvements? And if you look at KDOT's big program, their IKE program that they have, what projects, as you go through this process, actually score the most favorably? One of them is the improvements to K5, getting that improved access to 435. I think a lot of you have seen with the construction on K7 today, we've had some traffic shift down there already as they come towards Lansing and Leavenworth. But that was seen as something that could make some good improvements. The K7 interchanges scored well. There's a Western City bypass around Leavenworth that scores well. The West K10 connections, west of Tocanoxie, also scored well through this process. And we'll talk here a little bit about the Eastern Gateway, because that's been a project people have talked a lot about over the past year or longer now, looking at that. And that's also a project that just isn't ready to go for construction dollars. There's a lot of work, because it's a project of such magnitude, you really need to look at a federal funding source for that. The project isn't ready. There's a lot of criteria for that. What is ready, though, or what could be pursued, is to actually start to go after a RAISE grant for planning. Not that we like to come out of a planning study saying we need to do more planning, but this is a much more intense level of design work. We feel that's actually a good grant for what's called a RAISE grant, utilizing and working. The attempt would be to get KDOT to help fund some of the local match required for that, in addition to other sources to go for that grant. I do say, and we talked about this last time, that is a very competitive grant. It will require support from KDOT, from MoDOT, and it's also going to require active political support from your Washington representatives. So getting your representatives and senators behind that as well. There's a couple other US DOT competitive grants that are out there, one of which is a relatively new one. We're just on the second year. It's called the Safe Streets for All. It's a competitive grant for safety improvements. Leavenworth and Leavenworth County actually were recipients this year of those grants. You're eligible to pursue that as well. The past 2 years, KDOT has actually offered a portion of matching funding for them. There'll be a call for that project coming up next year, and it's really to help define a systematic improvement for how you make safety improvements in this area. Once you get through an action plan with that, you're eligible for more funds to make those safety improvements, and that's some steps that we would encourage you as a city to take as well. Going through the action plan, again, makes you eligible for the implementation grants to actually fund those constructions. So if you think about that, it's a process of applying for that grant next year, going through that action plan, and then the following year you'd be able to apply for the construction funding. Through the Mid-America Regional Council, they've got a set-aside program. It's called the STBG funds. Some of those corridors and projects that, again, score well, the K5 improvements, the 158th and 155th Street corridor, which is basically a parallel route to K7, providing connections between Basser, Lansing, and Leavenworth, about a mile or two to the west of K7. Parallel Road complete street improvements, the Toganoxie Eisenhower corridor improvements for some safety. That's where we do have some safety issues out there. And then continuing to focus on expanding some transit service as well. There are some additional KDOT fundings that are out there for the non-urbanized areas that can be considered, and the county can take into consideration as well. But there's a lot of small buckets there, so we weren't focusing on those necessarily. Mark also has what they call a Planning Sustainable Places, or PSP grant. This is a planning grant that allows communities and partners to actually advance projects and really define that vision for that. Two projects really kind of came to mind as we looked at that. One was looking at the 158th Street and 20th Street corridor, that parallel route that we're talking about, and defining that vision as you connect different communities. How do we start to bring that into more definition? The other one really came up after DeSoto was announced at the Panasonic plant. What can we look how to improve crossings of the Kansas River? And different alternatives right now, the crossings from Leavenworth County to Johnson County basically take you into neighborhoods. It's not really routes that are good routes to carry a lot of traffic in that area. And that's one we think you could work with your partners in Johnson County and the city of DeSoto. I know the city of DeSoto has heard of this, and they've got interest in talking a little bit and just seeing what makes sense for their community too. Those calls for projects will actually come out next spring as well. In our recommendation of the final report, you'll find action items not only for everybody, but for specific cities for you to consider as well through this process. So in conclusion, we've really reached out and built a lot of consensus working with a lot of stakeholders and communities through this process. The projects were evaluated on defined metrics that we could defend back up with data. And we align those with the different funding sources for consideration. Most importantly, this gives the chance for the Leavenworth County community and all the cities here to speak with one voice to advocate for projects. And we talked about that last time, how important it is to speak with a loud voice at things like the upcoming KDOT local consult meeting, which is scheduled October 17th in Lenexa. An opportunity for you all to come with support, with resolutions adopting and saying, for our region, these are the projects we feel are most important, because it's a heavy weighting that KDOT looks at. And in the past, we haven't necessarily seen the communities here speak with that one voice when some of your neighbors have. And that will give you a lot of strength to position for projects. So with that, happy to entertain any questions you might have. And again, I think there's action item for you to consider later on the agenda.
You have a list of the 1 through 43 priorities?
So we do. You can look at all that online.
Online.
It's actually in our final report as well.
Okay.
It's a thick document for you to look for, and you can see how even individual breakdowns of every project scored in every category. So
What is the number one priority? Don't make me go online. Just what's the number one?
I would have to, actually, it's one that doesn't show up, perhaps. It's a combination. If we look at that 158th corridor and a potential I-70 interchange improvements, those actually really rank very high, as well as K5 improvements and K7. So it depends on what source of funding you're looking at. One of the reasons you didn't see the I-70 interchange there in Baser on this list is because the funding for that can't include federal funds. The Kansas Turnpike was not built with federal funding. If they were to accept federal funds through either the USDOT or Mid-America Regional Council, and a lot of KDOT funding as well, that would require them to change the standards and upgrade all of the Kansas Turnpike to a different standard, removing the rest stops with the convenience stores in them, all those things. So that has to be built with KTA funds or local funds.
One other question. What's the difference between the K5 and the Eastern Corridor?
So the K5 enhancements, there's a little bit of overlap in some areas, but largely it's improving K5, if you will, from 435 over. The Eastern Gateway is a new Missouri River crossing.
that would actually come across in between the Centennial Bridge and the 435 crossing. So the K5 straightens it out, makes it faster, better, smoother, and the Eastern Gateway builds a new bridge that won't be built in our lifetime. And in candor, while that project has some merit to it, I think with what Kansas and Missouri are doing with the Centennial Bridge and that partnership right there, I don't think that's going to be high on their radar for a number of years as well. So, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
We plan for the future, Dan. Okay, no, appreciate it. Any other questions for?
No,
Yeah.
the
All right.
question I had was Dan pretty much hit it.
Okay,
I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
appreciate it. Thank you. Before I go to item number 3, I have been remiss in not recognizing Representative Dave Bueller, who came tonight, so thanks for coming. Appreciate it. Sorry I didn't say something earlier. Item number 3 is Fire Grounds Operation Presentation by Fire District 1 Chief Stackhouse. He'll be presenting a discussion on what happens during a structure fire and the personnel that are needed for it. And speaking for Chief
I'm not the
is-
chief, Rob Gaslin with the Fire District. Couple things before the chief comes up to bat. One, just a reminder, this is a little bit out of sequence. The chief was out of town 2 weeks ago, so I did a recap from the summer's presentations to you. And so tonight will be the last of the series. But that said, if we can provide anything, any help for you, just ask. That's what we're here for. The other thing is I wanted to real quickly introduce the chief by sharing very briefly what the Board of Trustees was looking for when we hired him. Late winter of 2020, in the height of COVID, or the low days of COVID maybe, our chief at the time he terminated his employment with us with little notice or explanation. We would later learn that he had been looking for alternate employment almost since the time that he arrived at the fire district about a year and a half earlier. And this created a lot of turbulence for us and some underlap of about 9 months between permanent chiefs. But it also presented an opportunity for the Board of Trustees to figure out and reflect on what kind of leader were we looking for to support our mission and vision and goals. So collectively, the trustees had tons of experience in leadership, in government, and in business. What we lacked was experience at the executive level in the fire services. So to compensate for that, we had a fellow by the name of Chief Craig Duke, who's the chief of the Topeka Fire Department at the time, who had that experience in spades, and he came to advise us. He did 2 things for us. Number one, on the front end, he helped us develop the screening and evaluation criteria that are fire service specific that we would use to later assess the candidates. And then on the backside, he would come and actually help us wade through the data that we collected in the resumes and in the interviews, and help us make sense of that again in the fire service specific areas. So that was enormously helpful for that. The board, we wanted to hire somebody that could be a good firehouse chief. That kind of goes without saying. But beyond that, we wanted somebody who had experience with government at multiple levels, somebody who could reason well, who could fully participate in strategic planning processes, who would help us solve some entrenched leadership issues, and could help get the district ready for the future. So we conducted a nationwide search, and I was very delighted at the time that we got some excellent candidates. Our screening criteria filtered out quite a few of those folks, but that left 3 fully and highly qualified candidates. And that represented, I think, the very best of the fire service nationally. So how did we choose? There were a number of ways, but here's perhaps the most interesting way. So given how our previous chief departed, we did not want that to happen again. Been there, done that. So the first candidate kind of told us, in effect, that we were a stepping stone to the next thing in his career. So like I said, been there, done that, and we did not choose him. The second candidate was from the Chicago area, urban core. During the online interview, remember this was during COVID, we could even hear the gunfire in the background and could watch him duck as he was conducting the interview. And in the end, we determined that he was trying to escape his present employment more than he was interested in joining us. So in contrast, Chief Stackhouse showed us that he was willing to take a chance on us as much as we were him and move his family here, plant some roots, take command of the organization, and the rest, as they say, is history. So I've asked him tonight to make a presentation that wraps all of the thorny personnel issues that we've talked about in here over the summer in a place that in the fire service they call the fire ground. Chief?
Good evening, gentlemen.
Evening.
I'm here to give a presentation about fireground operations and then specifically about structure fires and the associated personnel requirements and some issues associated with that. So structure fires don't happen every day here in Lansing, but they do happen. And in the fire service, we would say it's a high hazard, low frequency event. What that means for us is that we need trained, experienced individuals showing up on the fire scene able to mitigate the situation. We're all familiar with the recent tragedy in Maui, how a wind-driven wildland fire took out a city, basically in a location that it wasn't expected to happen. We had a similar event here in February of 22. Luckily, the outcome was much different. Between Markson and McIntyre Road, we had several hundred acres burned. That was a wind-driven fire. Had nearly every agency in the county, plus KCK here, had several structures that were threatened. Luckily, in the end, no structures were affected, and we stopped the fire due to manpower and luckily hitting a wooded tree line that slowed the spread down. So what happens during a structure fire? What happens when a fire is reported? Obviously, somebody has to report it. They call dispatch. Leavenworth County Dispatch goes to 911 center. That dispatcher utilizes CAD, computer-aided dispatch. And once they enter in some certain information, it recognizes the address and pulls up some certain criteria for the address. History, other pertinent information. But for us, a big thing, which is the mutual aid box alarm system, the MABUS. And I'll touch on that here in a minute. So once all the information is gathered, facts are dispatched over the radio to police, fire, and EMS. All three agencies respond to structure fires for different reasons. So I talked about MABUS. What is MABUS? The mutual aid box alarm system. So when I came here in 2020, basically what was in place was a mutual aid and auto aid agreement. On the fire scene, time is of utmost importance. Time and manpower so that we get operations initiated quickly, and I'll touch on time a little bit later as well. But if you look in the upper right-hand corner within the city limits, so what this is a detailed plan the dispatch has in their computer-aided dispatch, pulls up with the address, recognizes what's needed. When I first came here, there was basically Kickapoo Township, Fairmount Township, and Fire District 1 responds to a structure fire. What would happen is every time Kickapoo Township would call me on the radio or call dispatch on the radio, then dispatch called me, what do you need from us? Well, that's time wasted. In addition, the assets that they were able to bring were minimal. Nothing against them, but the length of travel and the volunteer department, it just wasn't a fit for what we needed. So I implemented this about a year and a half ago. What this is a detailed plan. You'll see the upper right-hand corner within the city limits. So now the city of Leavenworth sends an engine company. Fairmount sends an engine company. That's what's dispatched immediately. No questions. We know what's coming. Above the yellow line is first alarm. Everything below the yellow line is second alarm. So if things are progressing in a bad way, we're not getting the fire out, then I'll ask for a second box. And that's going to be Fort Leavenworth Center and the engine company. Why less departments coming to the city? Big reason, water supply. You have very good water supply in the city of Lansing. You'll see those hydrants are painted blue on top. That's not because we like the color blue. That's because NFPA color codes dictates what hydrants are painted due to their gallons per minute. Blue tells me that it's 1,500 gallons per minute or above. That's the best there is. So what dictates how many firefighters I need on a fire scene? My apologies. So we in the fire service use different guidelines than different agencies, city officials, etc. We use NFPA, National Fire Protection Association, which is based upon science and past occurrences. History dictates the future. So, of the few recognized NFPA standards, these are only a few of many, but NFPA 1710, 1521, 1561, and 1700, these are all specific to structural firefighting. 1710 is of utmost importance. It gives the most direction for manpower, apparatus on the scene, safety officers, etc. And you'll notice ISO criteria. So 1710, ISO pulls their requirements for us to get your property class rating from the 1710. All their criteria is pulled from that standard, the majority of it. So what does NFPA 1710 say about us, the fire service on a fire scene, on a structure fire? So right off the bat, it's saying that I need a minimum of 16 personnel and 17 if there's an aerial device used. Incident command, 1, I'm going to be en route to a structure fire. Incident commander, whoever it is, needs to be experienced, trained. They are responsible for the overall safety of the firefighters, personnel, civilians, etc., and getting the scene mitigated. Establish an uninterrupted water supply. I can't have water stop 10 minutes in when I've got a crew inside on a hose line. The water supply has to be established and maintained throughout the structure fire. That's going to come from a hydrant in the city of Lansing. Out in the county, dump tank, portable swimming pool that we use in the fire service. Once you get the pool built, we'll have another source, right? Establish an effective water flow. 2 hand lines. Why 2 hand lines? Safety, regulations, requirements say if I have 2 people inside, I need 2 people outside ready to go in and help the 2 people inside. Each one of those has a hand line. That's 4 people. 1 support member for each line. That 1 person is there shoving hose through the house, because remember, they're pulling a 200-foot hand line through mazes, hallways, stairways, etc. Need people on the outside able to put it in. If need a addition to the hose, then they'll add a section of hose. Establish at least 1 victim search of 2. That's the very minimum. If I have a multi-level residence, then I'm going to need more than 1 team. It takes a long time to do a primary search, and we have to do the search. If we aren't certain that everybody's out, then we assume that a rescue is needed. If we don't have an adult meeting us saying, hey, my wife and kids are out here at the tree with me, everybody's out of the house. If we don't have a neighbor that says, I'm watching the house, they're on vacation, I know they're not there, we assume that there's somebody inside. Establish team to raise ground ladders. Why do we need ladders? A couple of reasons. The house, as it's on fire, continues to build heat and smoke inside. Conditions get untenable for both anybody who needs rescued as well as the firefighters. So we use ladders to do a vertical ventilation. We cut a hole in the roof. We don't do it for fun, contrary to what people say. We're allowing those hot gases to exit the residence to make it tenable for rescue, for the people needing rescued, and the firefighters. Second, we also need a second means of escape for the search team, for the suppression team inside. RIT team. What is a RIT team? Rapid intervention team, that's 4 people. Past incidents have shown that the 2 people on the backup line can't get a firefighter in distress out. It's taken up to 16 people to get 1 firefighter out of a burning structure in the past. Dedicated person, 4-person RIT team, plus the 2 backup. One thinks, hopes that that's enough to go in and get a down firefighter. And then the operator, obviously, we need at least 1 person to operate it, whether it's elevated rescue or an elevated master stream. If it's in use, we've got to have somebody use it. All right, so the alarm goes out. What are we sending? In the city of Lansing, Fire District 1, it's going to be me, and then a captain, a driver operator, and a firefighter. That's an engine crew. 3 people on the engine, myself, and I hope there's some volunteers on the way. It's not likely. That's the truth. City of Leavenworth is going to send a battalion chief, a captain, driver operator, and firefighter. It's a battalion chief and an engine crew. Fairmount has a 4-person engine most of the time. They're a little bit up on manpower, so they're going to send a captain, a driver operator, and 2 firefighters. So we're at 12 personnel there with no volunteers showing up. We're already struggling to meet the minimum. Organizational chart, I only show you this because there's a lot of vacancies on the part-time and volunteer. We also have 4 open full-time positions currently. We're trying to mitigate this, taking steps, actions, but it's becoming an issue, not just with us, across the nation. So I mentioned time earlier. I mentioned manpower, so why does it matter? This is just one of many issues that we deal with on a structure fire, but this one is increasing in problems as modern day trends come into play. So a flashover. It's the point which everything in the room becomes consumed in fire. It's a minimum temperature of 1,100 degrees. It can be one room, it can be an entire building. I mentioned it's becoming an increasing problem. Why? Well, NFPA 921 states that modern research has shown that from an open flame to the time of flashover has occurred in as little as 1.5 minutes. When you're talking about a 7 to 8 minute response time, flashover can already have occurred. Why? Because modern furnitures are made of synthetic fabrics. The construction materials used in homes, PVC, synthetic lumber. Big thing, modern day, open concept. People like to see from the beginning of the house to the end. That's great for aesthetics, right? But walls, doors, they do stop the spread of fire. It doesn't have to be a fire door. It doesn't have to be a fire wall to make a difference. Just a normal wall, door closed makes a huge difference. I mentioned the 16 to 17 initial personnel, and that's throughout the duration that we need working. Fatigue sets in. It happens no matter what. On top of the fact that working a structure fire is very intense, strenuously, everybody from the firefighter to the fire chief is operating off adrenaline for the first 40 minutes, and then it takes a dive. And I've got a fire scene full of personnel that are just wore out completely. Well, what are my options? They have to go through rehab. Well, guess what? The fire doesn't wait on firefighters going through rehab, all right? So my options are to call for more help. And guess what? I've already got my surrounding jurisdictions. So we're looking at an increased time to get more help coming in. Now, yes, I'm going to call early when I see it happening, fact is, Kansas City, Fairmount, Leavenworth, the county departments, they have emergencies too. So they might be busy. Another issue, here in Fire District 1, we have a high frequency of simultaneous calls. Meaning if I'm on a structure fire, our department's working a structure fire, we'll get another call for a traffic accident or a medical run. So we're already taxing our available units on top of everything we've got there. That's the way it happens. That's why manpower, personnel are so important in the fire service. We're dealing with challenges across the board, nationwide, local, all across the board. The fire service, police departments, EMS, we're dealing with challenges. People don't want to work in emergency services. Volunteer firefighters dramatically increasing in numbers. It's just a fact. I would be surprised if I could say we have any viable volunteers in a year from now. It's just happening that quickly. People just don't have the time. It's a busy world. They can't afford utilizing their resources. I mean, it's a dying profession, sadly. What happens when the volunteers go away? The fire doesn't go away. The problems don't go away. I need the personnel to take their place. I need people to respond. So when the volunteers go away, we need to add more career firefighters. Nationwide, fewer numbers applying. I showed you earlier the organizational chart for empty spots for full-time. We don't get applicants. It's just a dying profession, especially in this area. I mentioned fewer applicants. On top of that, we're dealing in the fire service with more disabling events. Mental health issues. You got to remember that firefighters, EMS, police, nearly every call they go on, they're seeing the dark side of somebody's worst day. Continuously. Mental health is an issue. Physical injuries. Why? Why are physical injuries increasing? Because we in the fire service are doing more emergency operations with fewer people. If the public needs somebody to do something and nobody knows who to call, they call the fire department. That's what we do. Locally, losing people to larger departments. Why? Because they have a higher call volume. Young firefighters like to stay busy. They want to utilize what they're trained in. I can't blame them. Higher pay. 2-year KCK paramedic, $96,000 a year. Can't compete. No way. Availability of specialty teams. Those young firefighters, they want to be on a hazmat team, trench rescue, water rescue. And not only do they get the training, they want on a department that utilizes, that runs those runs, so they can use that training, that experience. Then lastly, uncertainty about the future of Fire District 1. It's having an impact on hiring and retention. So in conclusion, the decisions I make as the fire chief, you, City of Lansing, High Prairie Township, Delaware, the Board of Trustees for District 1, it all has an impact on the safety of the people and the preservation of the property. It is crucial that I have the right number of firefighters with the appropriate skill level. You can't just replace a firefighter with a body. It doesn't work. 5 years is what it takes to be a proficient firefighter. That's being continuously trained, getting the experience from the job, 5 years minimum. National and local trends, excuse me. Hiring and retaining firefighters is difficult. We're doing everything we can to combat it. I mentioned ideas in the past to you, the past meetings, continually brainstorming ideas to try to keep people, get people in first and then keep people. We're actively working to meet those challenges. So what's your questions?
You're at a structure fire and you don't know if somebody's in there, or you don't have anybody around to tell you if there's anybody in there. You
We're
just
gonna
assume
there's
that
a
you're going to.
rescue.
Who makes that decision whether to put the firefighters' safety at risk of going in there?
If it's a residence, it's not abandoned. If there's obvious signs that somebody lives there, if there's indicators, for instance, a car in the driveway, that helps make that decision. But there's nobody around, nobody to say there's nobody in there, I'm going to make that decision and announce that there's a rescue, or a possible rescue, I should say. We have to assume that there is. The other side of that is if we don't, and there is.
We want you to assume that somebody's in there.
Yeah.
Hey, Chief, I got a question for you, and I really appreciate you doing this, and I really appreciate you beating the drum, and the theme of the song is clear. I need volunteers, and I need applicants. So please don't take this in a negative way, okay? I'm just asking, all right? What are some of your leadership initiatives that you, your captains, and lieutenants are personally involved in recruiting? What are they personally doing?
On a day-to-day basis.
Whatever it takes.
Okay. Well, I mentioned the Adult Academy in a previous, so that's one thing that's in the works. I've got, so we just got done teaching a Firefighter 1 and 2 course at Fire District 1. I would say that Fire District 1 is a leader in instructing Firefighter 1 and 2 courses.
I saw all the trucks and cars out there.
Yes, sir. Yep. So out of that pool, I've got those potential cadets filled. There's a potential to fill all the open spots out of this class, I guess I should say. But in addition to that, we're going to job fairs. I'll be attending one coming up in Tonganoxie. Word of mouth is a big one. Open house. You know, as far as leadership to our current personnel, that's constant training, communications between me at all levels, firefighters, making them feel welcome at the firehouse. Everybody, not just one firefighter, small group, everybody, welcome. And we push family values and et cetera with the firefighters.
So we know we have a college, and we know we have KCA, KCK, you know, future. That's right. Yeah, coming from. And they got a great program connected with you. That's pretty good. But is there any other creative recruiting ways or incentives that you guys are looking and identifying as incentives to come to you? We used to say things like, it's a great place to start. Now, I know that may be verbed as negative, but if you get 2 to 3 years out of someone, but you've got a feeder system into you from either the high schools or the junior colleges, okay, I'll take 2 or 3 years and I'll lose them to go to the city for 96 plus K, but you got another feeder system, so you're constantly building and building. Now, I'm not saying anything you don't already know. I'm just asking, are the lieutenants and the captains actively recruiting in those type of environments versus you and Rick? I mean, Rob. I'm sorry. I don't know why I keep calling him Rick. Rob. Yeah, you and Rob.
Without being too blunt, there's a lot of professional development being done proactively with mid-level land management. It's ongoing. Yes, I would say that they're being pushed to talk it out during the Firefighter 1 and 2 classes, mention it, talk to others about it, push the positive aspects of Fire District 1. I won't approach anybody and say this is a stepping stone or a starting place. It puts that in their mind right off the bat. I want them to know that I want them here, and we're going to do everything we can to keep them there. If they decide to leave for a larger department later, that's their business. That's fine. I'm not going to hold it against them. Everybody has aspirations, you know. But my job is to get the firefighters in, train them, and keep them here.
Now, I agree with that. I'm just trying to look at incentives to come to you versus going straight to the city, you know, or going straight to higher
I
pay.
would say the biggest answer to that is making it an environment where they want to be. came here, and I don't want to dive
Right.
deep, but it was a small group of inclusiveness, and new people felt like they weren't wanted. And that can develop in this industry. Just because of what I mentioned, people see the negative, the bad things every day, it develops a mentality, and that's something that I, as the chief, the line officers have to combat every day, should be combating every day and making it a positive place to work.
Do we still have some type of agreement or work through with our high schools to, I think it's their spring semester seniors do something like 2 hours or something?
I've engaged, it's in the works, I'm still working on it. My intention, I've reached out to Lansing High School, also reaching out to other high schools in the county, say, hey, we used to have a cadet program, it's not the adult, that's why I named that one the adult, because my intentions were to have a school-age cadet program.
Mhm.
You come, we'll teach you daily, we'll get you firefighter 1, firefighter 2, hazmat awareness ops, we'll get you certified, and guess what? We can give you a job once you get out of high school. So that, yes, it's all being played out. A lot of brainstorming going on continuously on top of all the other operational duties, administrative duties that have to go on.
But there's some good incentives to working with you in that fire department. This lifelong lasting that is
Not
the,
everybody wants to go to a huge department.
no, you're right.
What we need to do is recognize, what people want. We're going to train them to the best of our abilities. That adult cadet program, asking, in the end, we're going to ask for a contract for so many years of service. Not because we want to make you pay, because, hey, we're investing in you. I want you to invest in us for a certain amount of time.
Well, you did use one word which is really disturbing, but it's accurate, a dying profession. And I agree with you. I think it is, because people today, they want 9 to 5. They want off on the weekend. And when you tell someone, hey, I need you to come and work for me and I'm going to pay you X, and guess what? You're going to have to put your life on the line sometimes. And you're going to work some strange hours. You're going to say, oh, never mind. So I agree with you. It's a dying profession, which is a bad thing.
The vacancies, how long have they been vacant?
I'm not going to sugarcoat it quite a while. Probably, I said 6 months the last time, but I went and thought about it. I didn't look it up. I want to say around 8 months. The problem is, and that's not continuous. What happens is I'll get a replacement. I'll get a firefighter in, and then I'll lose somebody. I just lost one this week to Topeka. But just hired a part-time that decided he would go full-time, so he's taking that spot. That's basically the trend that's happening.
Sure. Well, you got to come up and say your name and your address. Tell us who you are, even though we know who you are.
Okay.
It's
I'm
procedure.
Becky Gordon. I live on 102 South 3rd Court. My questions are basic. I could probably find it online. What are your hiring ages? What are the starting wages for the firefighters you're wanting to replace? And what are the requirements?
Okay. If I can talk, because I'm getting caught in the mouth now. I'm sorry. But, so 18 years old, minimum hiring age. And we can, it's either experience or we can train them. Starting wage for an experienced, meaning certified, not experienced, certified firefighter.
So does that mean EMT certified, or does
Yes,
that mean
that's
firefighter 1
firefighter
and 2?
1, firefighter 2, hazmat ops, hazmat awareness,
Okay.
and EMT, and that's around 42, close to 43,000.
Okay. Because I can see that, I mean, starting wages are what they are, that could be an issue for people who want to live in the city that they work in, that if there's not affordable housing for the same wages. That was just why I was wondering that.
Anything else, gentlemen?
No, thanks, Chief. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
Chief.
All right, new business. Valley Drive Storm Sewer Rehabilitation Project, 2023-03. Lexico and Lina Weaver submitted bids to be opened on August 9th for the Valley Drive Storm Sewer Rehab Project. Staff recommends acceptance of the bid, plus alternates 1 and 2. Alternate 3 would require securing additional easement, and staff recommends that alternate 3 not be accepted. So I need a motion to accept the base bid, alternate 1 and 2, and award the Valley Drive Sewer Project to Lina Weaver Construction in the amount of $359,665 with a 5% construction contingency.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion. Mike, do you want to say anything about the project, or
No, the bids were very favorable. We're excited to move forward.
council, any discussion on it?
Is
Well
this the
explained.
same that we've talked about recurringly?
Yes, this was one of our identified stormwater problems. We had a stormwater pipe failure last year, and we temporarily fixed
Yep,
it.
this is the one that had the temp fix that we
Yep.
put under.
And we're going to line the section A2 on here so that we don't have to close 4H Road.
I was going to ask, yeah.
That's our intention.
Now, in the packet, you were saying that there was another failure that you just found out that may impact
Yes,
the budget?
there's a pipe under 4H Road at K7 about 30, 40 feet west of the intersection that has also failed. We're trying to, we've got some stuff we're putting together. We're going to solicit some quotes for that. And we'll be bringing that back for the council when we have some better numbers. So we're monitoring it. You may have seen a sink. There's a little bit of a sinkhole in the turn lane.
Yep.
When you say you're going to line it, are you going to do pipe bursting to get the pipe under the road? What are you going to do?
No, they're just, because it's a large enough diameter pipe, they're going to go under it's like in situ form. It's like a plastic liner. It goes in there, and then they heat it up, and it expands, and then it creates a coating. Because we put a concrete floor in it to address that, but now we're going to take that and essentially waterproof that concrete floor so that it'll give us longer life.
Okay.
And prevent us from having to close 4H, especially
Yeah.
at this. It's a diagonal. It's messy.
Right. Okay.
Any other questions? All right, I have a motion and a second. Call the roll.
Mr. Stednica?
Yes.
Mr. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Kirby?
Yes.
Mr. Major?
Yes.
Mr. Garvey?
Yes.
Mr. Bueller?
Yes.
Mr. Clemens?
Yes.
Motion passed. Item number 5 is Resolution B3, 2023. Upon review and presentation, all government entities who are participating in the countywide transportation study are being asked to formally accept the study. So I need a motion to accept Resolution B3, 2023, a resolution to accept the countywide transportation study.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Call roll.
Mr. Stednica?
Yes.
Mr. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Kirby?
Yes.
Mr. Major?
Yes.
Mr. Garvey?
Yes.
Mr. Bueller?
Yes.
Mr. Clemens?
Yes.
Motion passed. Reports. Any department heads? No. City attorney. I'm going to say city engineer. I just like saying that. Sorry, Mike. Tim, what do you got?
So actually, I do have a few things. It was really nice. I'd had Representative Proctor and also Senator Pittman reach out to me about ideas for the existing LCF property. I know some folks in the legislature are kicking around different ideas on what to do with that parcel of ground. If there's anything you want me to pass along to those guys, feel free to let me know. I know there's 5, 6, 7 different types of ideas that are being bandied about, whether it's museum, ghost hunts, event center, all these different ideas that are being thrown out there. And I know a lot of them are looking at the old Missouri penitentiary as kind of a template, because that's a similar prison, and they've had a little bit of success there.
There's a good recap in the paper on you guys and what the possibilities are.
Yeah.
In Leavenworth Times.
So we appreciate that. So again, if there's anything you guys want me to run up the flagpole to the folks in Topeka, let me know. I'm sure Representative Bueller would also be able to pass that
They
on.
tried to give us that front building that one time, right?
Yes.
It needed a lot of maintenance and
Well,
cost a lot of money. Is that the same with the other building too, or?
Well, 4 or 5 years ago, I think, if I'm remembering that one correctly, I think they wanted us to rent it and renovate it, but they were going to retain ownership. And I think that was after the Lost 80 thing, and yeah, I don't think we were interested in that.
No.
And in this scenario too, I mean, I don't think the city wants anything to do with that, but it's good. I appreciate that we were asked to contribute in those discussions and kind of chime in. So, yep. So another thing that's really exciting, and this is another statewide thing. So you guys might remember a couple of years ago, Terry briefed you guys on the Dolly Parton Imagination Library Program. We were the first library in Leavenworth County to do that. If you guys recall, that puts brand new books in the hands of children from the time they're born until they're 5 years old. They come in the mail, they're addressed to the child. So that's such a fantastic program. The entire state took up that program, and that was actually pretty exciting. It was a program that had bipartisan support, it sounded like. So just a great program that the state's undertaking. But I felt like we were such trendsetters here in Leavenworth County. Terry was ahead of that. Terry had that program rolled out in Lansing 2 full years ago. So great job to Terry, but also to the state of Kansas, because that's a fantastic program, putting books in the hands of kids. So that was really great. I had mentioned to some of you guys the sales tax rate rollout. We coordinate with the state of Kansas on that, and it sounds like that didn't go quite as smoothly as we were hoping. It sounds like the TSCs, the Harbor Freights, the Quick Trips of the world, they have the capacity to catch things like that. There were some smaller businesses in Lansing that didn't know about that until about a month afterward. And so a couple of them were asking us to reimburse the difference for a little over a month. And so for an example, if that business was charging 8.95% and the sales tax rate is 9.4%, they were charging on a $100 sale, they're charging people 45 cents less. Over the course of a month and a few hundred sales, that really adds up. It wasn't quite as substantial as we were originally worried about last week, but we did have several businesses reach out to us. So we were thinking that would be a good thing to reimburse them the difference for that month. I wasn't sure if you guys had any thoughts on that.
My thought is, how much is it?
Yeah. I think the total
Or when you
amount-
know that, let us know.
As far as we know, the total amount is less than $10,000.
Around 8 something probably.
Well, and,
But you don't know if you've heard from everybody.
and we don't know if we've heard from everybody. That's correct too. But I'll tell you, I know one of the businesses that reached out to us. Again, he was pretty frustrated, and he was throwing around some pretty high numbers. And then when he brought it up to his accountant, it was about a third of what he thought it was going to be. So it's not as substantial as some folks were originally hoping. But again, it was, I'm frustrated with myself. In hindsight, I wish I would have reached out to people more too. But we were told, since people submit their sales tax reports to the state, that the state had some type of mechanism to let those businesses know that the sales tax rate changed. And
Well, we used to always get a notice from the state that said it's going to this on this date.
yeah,
And that's just the way it had always been. And apparently that's not what happened this time.
yeah, and
So we're being asked to cover for the state.
yeah, again, it's
Okay.
it's frustrating. It's kind of a lesson learned.
In summary, yes.
So I mean,
In
if
summary,
something
yes.
like this happens again, I would put forth a greater effort to notify people. So, but I did want to make you guys aware of that, and also if businesses reach out to you guys, refer them to me, to Beth, and we'll try to take care of that. So, I mean, Beth, do you have anything to add on that situation? So a couple other things. I'm going to be asking for volunteers here. So we'd mentioned during the budget season, our IT costs had gone up pretty significantly, so we're putting out a request for proposals in the next, hopefully, month, 2 months, to hopefully see what else is out there for IT companies for the city. So once we receive those proposals, a lot of times when we do that, we'll have a couple council members sit in on those committees with us. So if anyone wants to help us review IT RFPs, we'd love to have you.
Since I'm retired.
Okay. You're okay. And then the second thing, the city had been using Commerce Bank as our official depository for a pretty long time. Some of you might have heard through the grapevine they're closing their Lansing branch. So we're going to be looking to issue a request for proposals for an official city bank for Lansing. So that'd be another thing that when that comes up in a month or two, it'd be nice to have a couple council members review those proposals for our official city depository. So if anyone
Help
wants
with that.
I'll help
Good
you with
with
that.
counting money.
got it.
Looks like, yeah, Don and Marcus jumped on that landmine, so.
All right. Well, thank you guys. That's all I have.
Okay. Go around the horn. Don, I'm starting with you.
Start with me?
Yeah.
The only thing I comment on, I brought up to Tim the other day, I was watching the goat rope that was going on out here in the middle school. Parents were trying to pick up kids after school about 3:30 in the afternoon. Olive Street was completely blocked all the way back to the highway, and the outside lane on the highway blocked almost all the way back to 4-H. People couldn't get in, turn into the, into Olive, go to Petrol Deli or get home or whatever. So I think we need to address that with the school district, with their transportation guy, maybe our police department. We need to come up with some options that we don't block that highway. I mean, it just, we're asking for a fatality accident there, a bad one. It was really bad. I was in the middle of it myself, trying to get out of the neighborhood, and then I pulled over to the side and I watched the goat rope go on for a while. In the last couple of days, the same thing. So we got to fix that. They got to do something to stage people, parents coming in, whatever. What has exacerbated this problem, we've had it for a couple of years with the middle school, but it hasn't been as bad blocking the highway as the school year went on. But this year, I do know the school district has changed some of their busing policies. They're not busing all the students like they were before. So students that live within 2.5 miles, I think, or 3 miles, or whatever it is, they got to get to school somehow, and usually mom or dad bring them to school. So I think we need to address that. I think we need to pass the chief and Tim and get with the school guys and see if we can figure this out.
Yeah.
Very, very unsafe, and it's got to be addressed before somebody gets hurt or killed.
The
That's
chief
all
and
I
I
got,
can
Mayor.
definitely
Thank
reach
you.
out to the principal over there, and
Yeah.
Mr. Slapper is the chief transportation gentleman,
Yeah.
so we can reach out to those guys.
All right, great. That's all I got, Mayor. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Don. Kevin?
I'd like to thank everyone for coming in tonight. And Terry, once again, you're amazing. Thank you for being ahead of the curve on programs and for what you do for the kids in this town. So I appreciate it. That's all I have.
Yeah. Gene?
So, yeah, we had a deal, Tim and Mike, and I don't know, on East Beth with the construction of the new houses along there, and the fact that it's a dead end. So the neighbors for a long time have been putting up with a lot of grief, road blockages. All the houses sold, and everybody thought everything was done. And then late Tuesday afternoon, the utility guys come out and they're marking the utilities again. And the neighbors are like, "What now?" The houses have sold, the sod's been laid. So it come to find out that Clearwave has decided now to line up that neighborhood. So they do the utility locates late Tuesday afternoon and early Wednesday morning. Boom, they're all there. And Best Street, East Best Street, is one of the old roads. Barely get 2 cars down it now, and now we've got all the big trucks. And I guess the deal is the neighbors had just commented, if we'd have just known they were coming, so we could have prepared for it. We got a guy across the street who's on call for Spectrum. He never knows when he's going out. I mean, the guys would move stuff, but it was a little frustrating if you've been on that block this year to have all that going on. And we've all been very careful to keep our sod watered and growing, and there are some mighty big holes in them yards. We thought they were done last night, and then they showed up again this morning, and they weren't done. So I don't know, can we just say, give them a day notice or something? I mean, you're located Tuesday and Wednesday, the road's closed and yards are getting tore up again. And
Yeah, we can double check. I mean, this is outside of because their main project for the city is closed out, done, complete.
Okay.
So, I mean, this is
well,
supplemental.
they weren't on the block.
What's that?
They weren't on the block. I was the first one on the block to get them.
Yeah.
And then as the house is sold,
Yeah.
at some point, Clearwave decided, we're just going to do the whole
street.
do the whole street now.
Wouldn't they need a permit?
That's what I'm
They would have had to pull a permit.
Huh.
Permit, right?
Well, they had a
Closed
permit.
out.
I mean, they had to have come to
Got
the
permit.
city hall and got a permit, right? That's what I'm assuming.
I don't know, Josh ain't here,
I'm
but
not positive about that. I mean, this is the first time hearing of
Well,
it,
it just
so.
kind of like,
well, I mean, even when they pulled permits, Jesse, they didn't put anything on your house saying they're coming out front there and digging. I mean, it was.
well, it just would be nice if they're going to, again, and it's because of the Best Street.
Yeah.
It's one of the old streets. It's very narrow. And they, without any kind of notice or, hey, look out, we're coming in or something like that.
Yeah.
So, I told them I'd ask. So I asked.
Yeah, we can. I can ask them about that.
Yeah.
I mean, I can ask
I
them.
mean,
I
if
guess
they're
I
not
can-
required, then they're not, and then maybe that's something else to look at. If they're required to let the neighbors know, they didn't.
Yeah.
They mark everything, and less than 24 hours later, they've got the street blocked and yards tore. And people get that part of it. I mean, they want the internet, and they've got the option now. It's just, we're going to mark the utilities Tuesday at 4 o'clock, and at 8 o'clock Wednesday morning, we're going full bore without any kind of.
Could be worse. They could have marked the utilities and came back 2 months later.
Well, I can show you why they had to come back. Somebody that did some digging there caught a line and then just covered it back up. So that's why they had to come back, because they had to figure out where the issue was at.
Without knowing, I mean, if
Yeah.
they're in an easement or, I mean, there's a lot of things I guess I don't.
Sure. Well,
Again,
and it
this
just,
is the first time hearing of it. So,
yeah.
I mean,
Well, it just was really quick.
We can check
and
with
we
Josh.
thought it was one day, and then it
Yeah.
turned out not to be one day. And some poor sap doesn't have one hole in his yard; he has 2 holes in his yard. That's me. And I'm okay with it. Just would have been nice for
Yeah, no, I get it.
for a little heads up. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Gene. Marcus.
Yeah, I really appreciate the presentations tonight. Chief, I wasn't digging on you. I just want to make sure I repeat that. I'm not digging on you, but I take it personal, and it's very alarming and concerning that in today, that size of an organization and that quality of leadership that Rob presented, that we're still having problems with active duty. I get it for the volunteers, but active duty positions are still unfilled. I wasn't tracking that till tonight, so I feel for you. But I'm gonna set up time to sit down and. I mean, that's something we as a city should give a care about as well, and that's kind of where you're hitting it. So we put a lot of energy and effort in supporting our chief with the police and his turnover, and you've heard that. It's always been a challenge. I get it. But we as a city will dedicate time and energy to put towards helping. Every one of us will be volunteers trying to help, recruit, and fill something of that noble volunteer service. if not compete for active duty as well, absolutely. That's all I've got, Mayor. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Marcus. Jesse?
Yeah, thanks again for a very informative presentation. We appreciate every single one you guys have done for us. It really has enlightened us to a lot of things. So, Terry, congratulations on being an innovator. I know Dolly was in town last week. Did she stop by the library?
We got to go see her.
Did you really?
Oh,
awesome.
man, that's something.
Yeah, that's awesome. I actually seen the story about her coming through town and talking about the program. So that we were talking about tonight was really awesome. So congratulations. So that's all I've got.
All right, Greg?
Again, Chief, thank you very much. Very informative briefing. Dave, good to see you again. Welcome. Terry, that's great. Both my grandchildren are doing that program now after you mentioned it to me. So, and Mayor, 1977, Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, dies of overdose at the age of 42. And that's all I have.
Thanks for lifting our spirits, Greg. Dan?
Thank you very much.
Well, I'd like to remind everybody what's happened in Maui, the deaths and what they're going through there. If nothing else, keep them in your prayers and your thoughts. They're Americans on American soil, and they should have a special place in our heart. Tim, if you got a few minutes after the meeting, got some code enforcement questions to ask you.
Okay.
We're having people extend their driveways with gravel to the left and right, and putting cement blocks and calling that a driveway. But I've got some pictures for you.
Okay.
And with that, Councilman Bueller, you forgot one important thing. In 1955, I was born on this day.
Man.
Oh, wow.
I don't know
With that,
how I
make a
forgot
motion
that.
to adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion to adjourn. Call a roll.
Mr. Stednica?
Yes.
Mr. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Kirby?
Yes.
Mr. Major?
Yes.
Mr. Garvey?
Yes.
Mr. Bueller?
Happy birthday, Dan. Yes.
Mr. Clemens?
Yes.
I made her nervous. You see her.